Tonight, we're going to talk about something we haven't talked about. I haven't talked about it in a long time. We're going to talk about types and shadows. Now, all of you know the stories in the Bible. What you don't realize sometimes, that each one of these stories is a type or a shadow of the coming of Yahshua. In the book of Judges, several times we see Israel getting away from Yahweh, turning and worshiping idols, worshiping false. And yet there'll be one that will stand up and stand for the right and come and rescue them as a type of Yahshua coming. Because we're all in trouble. We've all been in a lot of trouble. But Yahshua come, and because of that, we have a chance for salvation. Without that, we have no chance. So each and every one of these ones that came and rescued Israel are a type of Yahshua. Or maybe not a real good type, but at least a shadow, where you can see a shadow of Yahshua in the story. I'm going to give you some examples, and let's look at them together, okay? Brother Paul, turn to the book of Genesis. I want you to start in chapter 37 and start reading Read the whole chapter.
All right. Page 41 in the Word of Yahweh, if that is the scriptures that you hold and are using, the version. And it starts out, it says, And Yaakov dwelt in the land in which his father was a stranger. He dwelt in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Yaakov. Joseph, 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah, and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought to his father their evil report. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a coat that had many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him, and they could not speak peaceably to him. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told that dream to his brethren, and they hated him still more. And he said to them, Listen, I pray to you, this dream which I've dreamed. For look, we were binding sheaves in the field, and then my sheaf rose, and also it stood upright, and behold, your sheaves stood all around, and made obeisance to my sheaf. And his brethren said to him, Shall you indeed truly reign over us, or shall you truly have dominion over us? And they hated him still the more because of his dreams and because of his words. Well, he went and he dreamed still another dream, and he told that dream to his brethren and said, Look, I've dreamed a dream more. And the sun and the moon and the 11 stars, they made obeisance to me. And he told the dream to his father and to his brothers. His father rebuked him, said to him, "What is this dream that you've dreamed? Are I and your mother and your brethren indeed supposed to come to bow ourselves down to you, to the earth?" And his brothers envied him. But his father observed the saying. He took note of it. And his brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "Do not your brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come on, and I'll send you to them." And he said to him, "Here am I." He said to him, "Go, I ask you, see whether it is well with your brothers, and if it's well with the flocks, and bring me word again." So he sent him out of the valley of Hebron. And he came to Shechem. And a certain man found him, and look, he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, "What are you seeking?" He said, I seek my brothers. Tell me, I ask you, where do they feed their flocks?" And the man said, "They've departed from here, for I heard them say, 'Let us go to Dothan.'" And Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. And when they saw him far away, even before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. And they said to one another, "Look, this dreamer's coming. Come on now, for this reason, let us kill him and throw him into some pit, and we'll say some evil beast has devoured him, and we'll see what will become of his dreams." Reuben heard this, and he rescued him out of their hands and said, "Let's not kill him." And Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood, but throw him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and don't lay a hand upon him, so that he might rid him from out of their hands to deliver him to his father again." And it came to pass, when Joseph had come to his brethren, that they stripped Joseph from out of his coat made of many colors that was on him. And they took him, and they threw him into a pit, and the pit was empty, there was no water in it. And then they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes, and they looked, and what? A company of Ishmaelites came coming from Gilead with their camels, bearing spices and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. And Yehudah said to his brothers, "What benefit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come on, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites. No, don't let our hand be upon him, for he's our brother, he's our flesh." And his brothers were content with that. Well, then there passed by Midianites that were merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph from out of the pit, and they sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Joseph to Egypt. Reuben returned to the pit and saw Joseph was not in the pit, and he tore his clothes, and he returned to his brothers and said, "Look, the child isn't here, and where am I going to go?" And they took Joseph's coat, and they killed a kid of the goats, and they dipped the coat in that blood. And they sent that coat made of many colors, and they brought it to their father and said, "This is what we found. Know now whether it is your son's coat or not." And he recognized it and said, "It is my son's coat. An evil beast has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt torn in pieces." Jacob rent his clothes, put sackcloth upon his loins, and mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, "Because I'm going to go down into the grave to my son mourning." And in this manner his father wept for him. And the Midianites sold him into Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's, a captain of the guard.
All right. Let's see if you can see the type here. Joseph, of course, he is the type of Yahshua. And he is his father's favorite. Okay? Was not Yahshua the favorite of the father? And did not the father send Yahshua to his brethren? Go see about your brethren. But when he got there, they weren't where they were supposed to be. They were off. You see, the type. So nothing is going to be absolutely, perfectly printed out for you. You have to look deep and see the picture. Now, some of you might even get a better picture of it than me. If you do, speak up. Now, they looked up, these evil brothers. They looked up and saw him coming. The type of Judah, the priests, all of those, they were looking for him. They saw him coming. Can you see that? They saw him coming. But they envied him. Now, you notice something back here. It said, the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wife, and Joseph brought the father their evil report. Have you read how many times Yahshua brought the evil report to these people that he came to? His brothers. These were his brothers. This was Judah. Are you seeing the picture? So they sold him, Judah sold Yahshua to the Gentiles. It says 20 pieces of silver there, but that was just a type. And what about Reuben? What do you see there? Reuben's trying to get him. Don't kill him. I'm going to save him. A type of Pilate. Pilate was trying his best to save him. I find no fault in this man. Reuben was a type of Pilate there. But they sold him into Egypt, which was a type of the grave. Anybody see more in this now? Are you able to see what I'm telling you anyhow? Are you able to see this type?
Yeah, I see this type.
Yes. What do you think this means where they conspired against him when they saw him coming?
Well, of course they did conspire against him. They conspired against him by not keeping the commandment to start with.
Isn't that like when one of his apostles took in the garden?
As a type. Nothing in a type and shadow is going to spell it out perfectly for you. You're going to have to look and see the story and see Yahshua in it. Okay?
And our government makes laws way ahead of time where when he comes along, then they can destroy him legally.
All right. Now let's move over and skip a chapter. You all know why we're going to skip a chapter. Because it's all about Judah himself. We're going to go to chapter 39. All right, Paul, you want to start reading?
All right. An interesting note that in this, the plans of the brethren were at first to kill him. Reuben got them to change their mind. Then the plans were to leave him in the pit until they could sell him to the Ishmaelites. But they never got to do that, because the Midianites came and found him, took him out of the pit, and they sold him to the Ishmaelites.
Yes. They turned him over to the Gentiles, and the Gentiles put him into death.
Right, but his brothers did not do that. They had plans to, but they didn't do it.
But what did they do? They
They-
formed a lie
Exactly
about
right.
him.
Exactly right.
Right?
He
And
was
they-
gone. He was gone in
it's the
any.
same thing, right?
He was gone in any case, and that's what they wanted.
The same thing they did to Yahshua. They formed a lie. His disciples come and took him out of the grave. Okay.
All right, chapter 39, page 43 of the Word of Yahweh. And
Now, this is part of the same story, but we're going to look at it a little differently. Go on.
And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought Joseph from the hands of the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. And Yahweh was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master the Egyptian. His master saw that Yahweh was with him, and he also saw that Yahweh made all that Joseph did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him overseer over his house, and all that he had he put into his hand. Joseph was the master of the house now. And it happened from the time that he had made him overseer in his house, and over all that he had, that Yahweh blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of Yahweh was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And the man left all that he had in Joseph's hand. And he did not know anything he had except for the bread that he ate. And Joseph was a good person and well favored. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, "Lie with me. Let's go to bed together." But he refused, and he said to his master's wife, "Look, my master doesn't know what is with me in the house, and he's committed all that he has to my hand. There is no one greater in this house than me. Neither has he kept back anything from me except for you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against Elohim?" Well, it came to pass, as she spoke to Joseph day by day, that he did not listen to her, to lie with her, or to be with her. And it came to pass about this time that he went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men of the house there inside the house. And the woman caught Joseph by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." And he left his garment in her hand, and he fled away and got himself out of the house. And it came to pass, when she saw that he left his garment in her hand, and had fled from the house, that she called to the men of her house, and spoke to them, saying, "Look, see this, he has brought in a Hebrew to us, to mock us. And he came in to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And it came to pass, when he heard that I had lifted up my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me, and fled away, and got himself out. And she laid up his garment by her until his master came home. And she spoke to her husband according to these words, saying, "The Hebrew servant that you brought unto us came to me to mock me. And it happened that as I lifted up my voice and cried out, that he left with his garment with me, and fled outside. And it happened that when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spoke to him, saying, According to this manner your servant did this to me, that his wrath was kindled." He was the captain of the guard now. And Joseph's master, Potiphar, took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound. And he was there in the prison. But Yahweh was with Joseph, and showed him mercy, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison. And whatever it was that they did there, well, he was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison did not look to anything that was under his hand, because Yahweh was with Joseph, and that which he did, Yahweh made it to prosper.
All right, let's stay here. Here is Yahshua again coming to his people. And he's going around doing good works. He's just bringing blessings down on everywhere he goes. Opens the eyes of the blind. He heals all that are sick. The scripture says in many places that he healed them all. Here was Joseph in this man's home getting blessings everywhere. Everything that he touched was a blessing. But the Jews, the priests, the Sadducees, what's the other? The
Pharisees.
They all were jealous of him. And they all lied on him. That woman was a type of the Sadducees, the Pharisees, and the priests, all that turned on him for his good works. And he was cast into the prison. Death. And here he is in death. Okay. Now we're going to read chapter 40.
All right, chapter 40. Now remember verse 23 of 39, the keeper of the prison did not look to anything that was under his hand. He was trusting Joseph. That's the kind of relationship that had developed there. Because Yahweh was with Joseph, and whatever Joseph did, Yahweh made it to prosper. Well, the prison keeper could see this quite clearly. He may not have known the origin of why he prospered so well, but it was clear to him that it was a good thing that Joseph was where he was. And it came to pass after these things, the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker had offended their master, the king of Egypt, the Pharaoh. And Pharaoh was angry against the two of his officers, against the chief of the butlers, and against the chief of the bakers. And they put him under guard in the house of the captain of the guard, into the prison, the place where Joseph was bound. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, made him responsible for them. And he served them. And they continued a season under guard, in ward. And they dreamed a dream, both of them, each man his dream in one night, each man according to the interpretation of his dream. The butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were bound in the prison. And Joseph came in to them in the morning and looked upon them, and he saw that they were very sad. And he asked Pharaoh's officers that were with him in the ward of his master's house, and he said, Why is it you're looking so sadly today? What's going on? Well, they said to him, We've dreamed a dream, and there's no interpreter for the dream. Joseph said to them, Don't interpretations belong to Yahweh, to Elohim? Tell me these dreams, I ask you. And the chief butler told his dream to Joseph and said to him, In my dream I saw a vine was in front of me, and in the vine were 3 branches, and it was though it budded. And her blossoms shot out, and the clusters of those buds brought forth ripe grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took those grapes, and I pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. And Joseph said to him, This is the interpretation of your dream. The 3 branches are 3 days. So within 3 days, Pharaoh is going to lift up your head and restore you to your place. And you're going to deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand according to the former manner when you were his butler. But think on me when it shall be well with you, and show kindness, I ask of you, to me, and make mention of me to Pharaoh, and bring me out of this place. For I was indeed stolen away from out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also have I done nothing that they should put me into the dungeon for. Verse 16, when the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said to Joseph, Well, I also was in my dream, and I saw that I had 3 white baskets on my head. And in the uppermost basket there was all kinds of manner of baked meats for Pharaoh, and the birds ate them from out of the basket upon my head. Joseph answered, and he said, This is the interpretation of your dream. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Yet within 3 days, Pharaoh is going to lift up your head from off of you, and he's going to hang you on a tree, and the birds are going to eat your flesh from off of you. And it came to pass the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast to all his servants. And he lifted up the head of the chief butler and the head of the chief baker among his servants. And he restored the chief butler to his butlership again, and he gave the butler gave the cup into the Pharaoh's hand. But the Pharaoh hung the chief baker just as Joseph had interpreted to them. Still, yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but forgot him. He did not speak kindly of him to Pharaoh.
Did you read the last verse?
The last verse, yes.
Yes, sir.
All right. How many times did you see 3 in there?
Several.
3 branches, 3 days, 3 white baskets, 3 days. 3 days your head's going to come off. 3 days you're going to be set back up as the butler. 3 days, 3 days, 3 days. How long was Yahshua in the grave? 3 days. Now, all right, let's go on, chapter 41.
Verse 1 of chapter 41, And it came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh dreamed a dream, and he stood in his dream by the river. And he saw that there came up from out of the river 7 well-favored kine, fat-fleshed, really well-fed, and they fed in a meadow. And he saw 7 other kine came up after them out of the river that were ill-favored, lean-fleshed, very thin. And they stood by the other kine upon the brink of the river. And the ill-favored and the lean-fleshed kine did eat up the 7 well-favored and fat kine. And so Pharaoh woke up. And he slept again and dreamed the 2nd time. And he saw 7 ears of corn came up upon one stalk, rank and good. And he saw 7 thin ears, blasted with the east wind, sprung up after them. And the 7 thin ears devoured the 7 rank and full ears, and Pharaoh woke up, and he saw it was a dream again. Well, it came to pass in the morning his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt, and all the wise men of Egypt, and Pharaoh told all these men his dream, but there was no one that could interpret those dreams to Pharaoh. Well, then the chief butler spoke up to Pharaoh, saying this, I do remember my faults today. Pharaoh was wroth with his servants, and put me in ward in the captain of the guard's house, both me and the chief baker. And we dreamed a dream in one night, he and I. We dreamed each man according to the interpretation of his dream. And there was there with us a young man, a Hebrew, a servant to the captain of the guard, and we told him our dreams, and he interpreted to us our dreams. To each man according to his dream he did make an interpretation. Well, it came to pass as he interpreted our dreams to us, so it was. It happened. Me, Pharaoh restored to my office, and the other man, the baker, Pharaoh hung. Well, then Pharaoh sent, and he called for Joseph, and they brought him hastily from out of the dungeon. And he shaved himself, and he changed his clothing, and came into Pharaoh.
All right, let's stop right there. All right. Now, let's look at this whole story for a minute. And remember, Joseph represents Yahshua. He's been in the grave 3 days. After this, the dream comes. Joseph is sent for. The first thing he does is shave and change his clothes, which is a type of Yahshua changing that body
His resurrected body.
to right. Paul's seeing it. It's a type of Yahshua coming out of the grave in a new body and a new, like you will, one day, if you go into the grave, one day you'll come out and you'll be all shaved and new clothes all over you, a new body. The clothes represents the body.
We'll be clean.
So here he comes out. But who brought him out? One representing the Father, Pharaoh. Here he represents the Father. And he brings him out. I'm going to cut it a little bit short on the reading because we got more to go to. And Joseph gives him the interpretation, which is a type of Yahshua coming out and showing everything that he has done. And he is, Father Yahweh puts him in charge of the world. Second only to the Father.
Right.
Okay, are you seeing this thing also as another type? Are you able to see it? If you're not, that's okay. Don't worry about it. None of these things are salvation issues. If you don't see it, it doesn't matter.
Now, this fits right into what Brother Buddy has been teaching for the last several weeks about how all Scripture is being taught in mysteries and in parables. This is just another level, another layer,
Yes.
these types and shadows.
But Yahshua said, search the Scriptures. You think you know them, he said, but every one of them is about me. In some way or order, all of them are about him. And I can't see them all. I can't, there's a lot of stories that I see that I have trouble seeing a type, but there may be a shadow there. Like what we were talking about earlier in the book of Judges. I believe that's a shadow of Yahshua coming time after time and saving Israel.
That'd be the only way we could be saved.
All right. Let's go to Genesis. I thought I had it marked.
What about Joseph?
No. Wait a minute, I'll get it.
I really appreciate your help today.
Okay, chapter 22. There's my marker on the
What
floor.
is, what is it? What is it?
22.
Chapter 22. Genesis chapter 22.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Steve helped me a lot.
My daughter saved me. As a type of Yahshua. Saving. Okay, chapter 22. Paul, read it down through chapter 14, verse. Verse 16.
All righty. Page 21 in the Word of Yahweh, chapter 22 of Genesis.
Now, as we read this, try to see it in your mind's eye, seeing Yahshua, okay? Go ahead, Paul.
All right. Now, it came to pass after these things. They had just finished, at some point in time prior, making a covenant of some sort at Beersheba. Abimelech rose up, Phil called the chief captain of his host, and they returned to the land of the Philistines. And Abraham planted a grove in Beersheba, and called there on the name of Yahweh, the everlasting El. And then Abraham sojourned in the Philistines' land for many days. Verse 1, chapter 22, and it came to pass after these things that Yahweh did test, I don't believe the word tempt belongs there, Abraham, and said to him, Abraham, and he said, look, here I am. Yahweh said, take now your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and get yourself into the land of Moriah, and offer him there in that land for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains I'm going to tell you about. And Abraham rose up early in the morning, saddled his ass, and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, and cut the wood for the burnt offering, and rose up, and went into the place of which Elohim, Yahweh, had told him. Then on the 3rd day Abraham lifted up his eyes, and saw the place far away. And Abraham said to his young man, you stay here with the ass, and I and the lad are going to go up yonder and worship and come again back to you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering, laid it upon Isaac his son, and he took the fire in his hand. It was a bag or a container or a stone cup of coals, and he took a knife as well, and they both of them went together. And Isaac spoke to Abraham his father, said, my father. He said, I'm here, son. He said, look, the fire and the wood are here, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? Abraham said, my son, Yahweh will provide for himself a lamb for a burnt offering. And so they went both of them together. And they came to the place which Yahweh had told him about. Abraham built an altar there, laid the wood in order, and tied up. He bound Isaac his son, laid him upon the altar upon the wood. Abraham stretched out his hand, and he picked up the knife in order to kill his son. And the angel of Yahweh called to him from out of the sky, from out of the heavenly realm, and said, Abraham, Abraham. He said, I'm here. He said, do not lay your hand upon the lad, neither do anything to him. For now I know that you fear Yahweh, seeing that you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes, and he looked, and he saw behind him a ram that was caught in a thicket by his horns. Abraham went and took that ram, and offered him up for a burnt offering in the place of his son. And Abraham called the name of that place Yahweh Yireh, as it is said to this day, in the mount of Yahweh shall it be seen. That's verse 14.
And the angel of Yahweh called unto Abraham out of the heaven the 2nd time, and said, I by myself have I sworn, saith Yahweh, for because thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, that in blessing I will bless thee, and I will multiply thy seed, as the stars of the heaven, as the sand which is upon the seashore. And thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies. All right. How many sons did Abraham have?
2.
That that's mentioned.
at that time.
That's the only ones that are listed. I know he had a bunch of other sons. That's the only ones that are listed.
Yeah, at that time.
Right.
If you look in the
Ishmael
genealogy-
and Isaac.
If you look in the genealogy, those are the only two that are listed. Although later on, there's a bunch of other ones that he
That's
had.
right, of course. Now, he was told to offer him up. Now, this is a type of Abraham, the typing out Yahweh, and Isaac as Yahshua. Now, how many days was he dead in Abraham's mind?
3 days, I believe. It was a
3
3-day
days.
journey.
3 days and 3 nights that it took him to go from where he was to Mount Moriah. And how many went with him? How many was there besides Yahshua?
2 others.
2 others. You seeing how all this types out Yahshua? Where exactly did this happen?
On the very place where Yahshua was killed.
Yes, absolutely.
It wasn't called Moriah at the time. It was called Golgotha, place of the skull, at the time. But
Calvary or
this is by the time the Greeks and the Romans had renamed the place.
right. Are you able to see the type there of Yahshua being offered by his Father? Are you able to see the type of us being saved by the Lamb through Yahshua? All right, I'm going to ask now. Can anybody think of any other stories that types out Yahshua, or at least you can see a fuzzy picture of it?
Joshua going into the promised land.
What's that now?
Joshua going into the promised land.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I was going to bring that up. I'm glad you brought it up. But now, Israel is us. It represents us, okay? Now, who brought them out of Egypt?
Moses.
And what does he mean?
He is a type of Yahshua.
Moses was a type. Well, yeah, too. They're a type of bringing Israel out. But here, what I'm talking about is Moses represents the law. The law brought them out and brought them all the way to the promised land.
Right.
But what took them in?
Yahshua.
Yahshua. You see, Moses could not take them in. The law cannot take you in either. It takes Yahshua. But it takes the law to bring you there.
And of
Do
course,
you understand that?
and of course, Yahshua or Joshua means Yah is or salvation, or
Right.
Yah's salvation.
But
It took the
you
law.
can't get there to the promised land without obeying the commandments and the law. That's repentance. Repentance.
Even the Gentiles repented when they came to Yahshua.
Yeah. The repentance is brought you there, but you got to go through the water
Right.
to reach it.
Which is a type and shadow of baptism.
Right. Repentance and baptism, entering into what? represents the Holy Spirit. Thank you, Terry. Somebody else got anything? Well, think of any story.
Gideon.
Gideon, a good one. Gideon was, I think he was a type of us today. Gideon knew the truth, but his father, if you'll remember, his father had begun to serve Moloch and the others. And he, as a matter of fact, he even built a whole grove. And this grove, Paul, tell them what the grove is, really.
A grove, otherwise known as an Asherah, was a bunch of carved totems, images carved into wood, and they represented the idols that were worshipped at the time.
And here he was under all of these people who were ruling Israel at that time. But Gideon gets this visit by the angel of Yahweh. Now, you can place that to be whoever you might want it to be. In my mind, it's Yahshua. And he come and visited Gideon. So the first thing Gideon does is go back out there in his father's grove and start tearing it down and burning it. And of course, even his own people come against him.
He did it at night, didn't he?
Huh?
Didn't he do it at night?
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Good point. So, Gideon gets to thinking about this. The angel of Yahweh told him, you go down here, you take all these people, and you go and I will fight the battles for you. So Gideon gets to think about this after a while, and he's thinking, now I'm just giving you my ideas of this. But he gets to thinking, maybe I dreamed this thing, you know? Maybe this really wasn't an angel. So I think I'm going to try. I'm going to try him and find out just how much he's going to do what he said he'd do. So I'm going to put this little piece of lamb out here, and I'm going to go to bed tonight, and when I get up in the morning, I want that thing to be absolutely soaked with water. And I want it to be dry all the way around it. So he gets up the next morning, he goes out there, and that fleece is absolutely soaked with water. But everything else is dry around it. And he gets to thinking to himself, and he thinks, well, that could be a coincidence. How many times have you really said that could be a coincidence? So he says, I will try you again tonight. Tomorrow morning, I want that fleece to be absolutely dry, but I want everything around it to be wet. And he got up, and it's exactly what he found. Yahweh was true. But then Yahweh says, okay, I'm going to try you now. You tried me, I'll try you. Take all of these armies. First, you tell them if they're scared, if they got fear, leave. And you take the rest of them down to the water to drink. And those that get down and drink like a dog, or those that drink from the hand, only 300 of them drank that way. He said, send the rest of them back. Now go do it with just not 30,000, just 300. Now go fight them. You all see a type in this? I see a type of me. I see a type of me in the whole thing of having doubts. So the story goes that he separated them out, either 2 or 3 different groups. Gave them a picture. Told him to light a fire in it. Put a candle in it. And when I tell you to, all of you break that picture. Break it so that that light will shine out suddenly. And when they did, they all cried out, what, Steve?
Sword of Yahweh and of Gideon.
That's right. The sword of Yahweh and Gideon. And all of these people,
Turned and started killing each other.
Midianites, I think, they all jumped up and started killing each other. Till they wiped themselves out. That's good. Somebody got another one? We don't have much time.
Story of David.
Huh?
Story of David.
Oh, that's a long one there.
Yes, it is.
The king. First come a king who was, it's a type of the first horse. Remember the white horse? The one that comes that looks so good, looks just like your right one, but he don't have a sword. He got a bow. When Saul come, he was head and shoulders above all of the other people of Israel. He looked the part. And David was just a little guy, a sheep herder
A nobody.
that went and fought the giant and became type of Yahshua.
Jonah.
Speak up.
Jonah.
Jonah was a type of Yahshua, there's no doubt about it. Jonah was a prophet. Some people say he was the earliest prophet. He was a prophet in the court of Jeroboam 2. Jeroboam 2. And Yahweh spoke to him and said, I want you to go over to this place where where was the place?
Nineveh.
Nineveh.
That was the Assyrian capital at the time.
Right. You go over there and you tell them people that in 30 days,
40 days.
40 days, I'm going to destroy it. Thank you. But Jonah said, no, I don't think so.
I don't like them people.
So he goes down and gets in a boat and takes off. And of course, you know the story how the storms came up and the ship was about ready to sink. And they cast lots. And the lots fell on Jonah. And they said, "What have you done?" And he told them, said, "Yahweh told me to go do this job, and I haven't done it." So they threw him in the water, and there's a great fish or whale there waiting to swallow him. Took him down to the very, very bottom of the ocean. And Jonah was dead there 3 days and 3 nights. No one could live in that situation. If you read what Jonah had to say, he said that the seaweed actually ran over my face. So he was 3 days, 3 nights, but he was type of Yahshua in the grave. And 3 days and 3 nights later, he was cast out. And he hit the land running. He made a 3-day trip in 1 day. He went and preached to the people. And they believed. But Jonah, he weren't happy about it. I went through all this. I knew you were a forgiving El. I knew you were. And I went through all this 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a whale. And you are going to just forgive them. Of course, Yahweh calls this big gourd to grow up. And he had some shade. It was, no doubt it was hot. And he was so happy about that gourd. And suddenly the gourd is eaten by a bunch of what? Worms? And then he's upset. Yahweh says, "You're upset about that gourd? What about thousands of people here?" Said they don't even know their left hand from their right. But they repented. All these beautiful stories. That's a type of Yahshua. He himself said, this is the only sign that's going to be given to you. Jonah was in the whale's mouth for 3 days and 3 nights. The son of Adam will be in the heart of the earth 3 days and 3 nights.
And the Assyrians in Nineveh are a type and shadow of the Gentiles that have come to know Yahshua.
No doubt. No doubt at all.
Because they were not Israelites. And he did not want to preach to them because they weren't Israelites.
That's right. Another good point.